champions, that's who they are. Each one of them an SNL star. The truly great Saturday Night Live. Every week we do a deep dive. Let's find out who are the greatest hosts, the ones that the fans love the most.
Yes, welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network for another edition of our countdown of Saturday Night Live's greatest hosts of all time. My name is John from the SNN. So happy to be with you on another Monday this summer, as we are every Monday night, to count down the greats who have walked the halls of Studio 8H. And I'm so excited tonight to be with two amazing guests, and of course here as a presentation of latenighter.com. So first up, let me bring in the man I haven't spoken to since the end of season 49, and that is the legendary Andrew Haynes. Haynes, how are you?
I'm doing awesome, man. And honestly, after that musical intro, I feel like I'm living in a glitter pop dream. Like that new theme song is amazing. So yeah, just having a great summer. It's hot everywhere. I'm doing the same thing as everybody else, just trying to survive.
Yeah, for sure. Are you a big Olympic person?
I am. I mean, I always watch the Olympics. I did think about popping on like a red, white, and blue shirt or something tonight, but I didn't get around to it. I mean, my hair looks insane. I'm not exactly like in full presentable mode right now, but I don't think our fans care. Yeah, love the Olympics. I thought the opening ceremonies were super cool. I mean, I love watching the opening ceremonies. Still to this day, I think that Beijing 2008 was the wildest. I just loved all like the orchestrated stuff. You know, they'd have like thousands of people beating the drums at the same time and stuff. I thought that was super cool. But this one was very wild. Loved the light show. And not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I did watch the full like 3.5 hour, intro or whatever it was.
I think it was like 5 hours.
It was long. Yeah, it was long. Yeah.
Well, to talk more Olympics and Saturday Night Live hosts, let me bring in one of our amazing patrons, and that is Brennan Keller. Brennan, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Also have been watching the Olympics nonstop. We got a TV at work that is only switching between the three Olympic channels during the day. So that's always fun. I've been chilling this summer. I just saw yesterday one of SNL's favorite bands, the Foo Fighters. So I've been going to a lot of shows while there's nothing on to watch on Saturday night. So it was a great show. So I've been chilling all summer. Excited for season 50. Excited to talk hosts tonight. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great. So great to get to speak to both of you and catch up on everything that's happening this summer. Last word on the Olympics, which are happening as we speak. It was really cool to get to see Colin Jost, who was sent to. He had the best assignment in the world right now, PD to go surfing. Haynes, did you see any of this?
I only saw I saw a couple little clips, yeah, but not too much.
Yes, living his absolute best life.
I know that he's wounded right now. I saw him like tweet or Instagram or something. He put up a picture of his foot like covered in bandages, and he said he's been spending more time in the medical tent than any of the athletes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's like so chiseled and like, just perfectly like relaxed and having a good time. Like something had to go wrong. It couldn't be exactly
that's what he wants you.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe did it on purpose. So I saw that, and then last night, and this is cool, and I want to point this out for all of our SNL friends, that John Mulaney was with Mike Tirico on NBC for the primetime wrap up for the Olympic show, and it was the first person that they had on to promote SNL 50. So this is, I believe, the first official promotion of the 50th season of Saturday Night Live. Our friends over at Late Nighter on social media, they put up a clip. So in case you missed that interview, it's about 2.5 minutes of John Mulaney talking about what he's excited about for the 50th. He talks about his relationship with Charles Barkley and why he wanted to go to the Olympics. So it was just a small little brief thing. I think we got to see the new SNL 50 logo there as well in the background. So we're getting some snippets here. I feel like we're just like opening the door a little bit. It's coming only a couple months away now. So Brennan, it's very exciting times in these SNL streets.
Oh yeah, very exciting. I mean, I watched it. I was excited to see John Mulaney. I mean, anytime on TV. So, I mean, it's always fun when they get someone, random or a comedian just to talk Olympics, because it's honestly a really fun thing every 2 years, either whether it be the winter or the Summer Olympics. It's always just fun to see what NBC does with the promotion and the games in general. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll look forward to seeing what else they put on as they start to begin promoting the 50th even more. So you may notice that Bill Kenny is not with us tonight. He's traveling with his family. So wishing him the best on his vacation. We do have his rankings of the new hosts that we're going to reveal tonight. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show, and Bill will rejoin us for the show next week. So this is Haynes and Brennan's first time on this countdown. So I will put up a list of everyone we have revealed so far, and I want their opinions. I want to know from both of you, what you think that all of the fans who voted in these polls have done so far with the reveals. Here we go. If you're watching live on YouTube, we have 50 through 25, so halfway through this countdown. From the bottom, Danny DeVito, then John Lithgow, Anne Hathaway, Jack Black, Dana Carvey, Paul Simon, Louis C.K., Lily Tomlin, Jimmy Fallon, Charles Barkley, and at 40 is Eric Idle. Then up from 40, we got Amy Poehler, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Josh Brolin, Conan O'Brien, Peyton Manning, Bill Murray, Richard Pryor, Zach Galifianakis, Drew Barrymore. At 30, we have Larry David. Up from 30, we got Dwayne Johnson, Maya Rudolph, Pedro Pascal, Elliot Gould, and Jim Carrey. Haynes, a lot of names here, but how are you feeling about the list so far?
I don't hate the list. I think it's always tough, trying to judge these type of things, since, people obviously host very, disparate amounts. Peyton Manning, has hosted once, but it was such an awesome job. He kind of goes out on top, like he doesn't get to mess anything up. So we've got this golden episode that, elevates him in the rankings. But then you've got someone, like Louis C.K. or Amy Poehler or Jimmy Fallon, who I just feel like have hosted so many awesome episodes. It's hard to, I don't know if I like seeing some of those folks pushed so far down this list. But listen, I like, and we're only halfway through it. So it feels a little weird. Like, I don't know, Maya Rudolph sitting at 28. Are we really going to come up with 27 people, or what are 22 people that are better than Maya Rudolph? I don't know.
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
So,
I think she's high on this list. But
yeah.
But that's for
me. Oh,
me.
you think she's high? You think Maya's too high?
I think Maya's Maya's high on this list for me. As a cast member, I couldn't agree with the ranking. As a host, I think she's too high. There's a lot of really good hosts out there. I would like to know, though, from you, like on a similar vein, like, is there anybody in this list of 26 that we've revealed so far that you were like, oh, they should not be there?
I don't know about that.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Brennan, what about you? I know you've been following week to week. How do you feel about the list so far?
I like the list. I think I probably did about 30 to 40 names, or whatever the number we were supposed to give when I sent my list in a unorganized order over to you guys. Like a lot of the names I had on my list I am seeing here, which is always something to enjoy, because you're like, oh, I have good taste. That's always awesome.
Yeah,
thank you. No, but I mean, if I had a nickel for, which is like, if I had any saying I've said here probably 3 or 4 times, the first episode of SNL I ever watched was the Anne Hathaway Thanksgiving episode. So, I mean, that one has a big meaning to me, but I think it's a great. I've always liked her. She's too low on the list for me. But if there's anyone else I want to like complain about being low, I'm not going to complain at all, honestly, because these are 50 people out of 50 years of shows. So if I'm seeing, nearly all the 30 names that I put on my list on here already, I'm not going to be upset. I like seeing the people that I thought were really, really good hosts, like, on this list, and I like seeing that people agree with me. Like Zach Galifianakis, I probably would have put in my top 20. Louis C.K., his 4 episodes are all phenomenal. Like, he's not someone you're supposed to talk about right now, but like, there's going to be another name on this list that's going to be in the top 25. Like, I would be shocked if it's not, because of how important they are to the show, but because of, outside issues, it's going to be something that we're going to have to focus on but in the context of SNL, they really are a top 50 host of all time. I like Dwayne Johnson on this list. He was probably like one of the one of the best hosts I think ever, especially since I was able to talk about him on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. So that's pretty cool. Um, yeah, that's all I got right now. I like the list so far. I like the names that we're gonna talk about tonight, and I really like what the last 21 are gonna be. Even though I don't know them, I just know that probably 10 or 15 of the people I wrote down are gonna be on that list. So
Fair enough.
I will jump in here and say something that is gonna ruffle someone's feathers. I don't know if it'll ruffle any feathers on this current panel, but it's gonna ruffle someone's feathers. There is someone who I don't think belongs on this list, and it's gonna ruffle feathers because this person was so associated with the show so early, and they have been an important part of the show for such a long time, such a friend of the show. But this person is a great musical guest. Honestly, they're only an okay host, and they're really just like one of Lauren's best friends. Paul Simon is not a great host. He's an okay host. Paul Simon's he's an okay host.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. He's not a good host, and
Yeah.
and
he's
I
a frequent host, sure.
yeah, no, and yeah, we definitely litigated that during his time when we had him on the list. He's at the bottom of my rankings. He wouldn't be in my top 50. So yeah, for me, he has his moments, but I definitely don't think he's not a host, like as far as I'm concerned, like not somebody who's like in the traditional role. So it's a good to point out. Before we get to our first reveal, which we'll do momentarily, Haynes, I just got to ask you, because we did have you on for the cast countdown, and we talked about your criteria for evaluating cast members. I would love to know, what are we looking to hear from you tonight before we get into the specific people that you are looking for when you're saying, is this a great host or not?
Well, I think you have to be impactful in the sketches. And I think so. I don't think that just because someone hosts several times, just because they're constantly in the media cycle and they've just had a lot of hit movies over an 8-year period, I don't think that just because they get 3 hosting gigs under their belt, I don't think that launches them, into a top 50 or anything like that. I think you have to be impactful in the sketches, and I think monologues count for something. I think that some people make a bigger impact with monologues than others, but the monologue's not nothing, so it counts for something, and it's a lot of it's about the lasting impressions. What do we think back about? What do we remember? What sketches do we want to go back and watch 20 years later that this person was involved in? And yeah, so just that kind of stuff.
It's all good. That's great. And then Brennan, same question for you. Would love to know if there any criteria we're looking to hear from you specifically tonight.
Honestly, the really interesting thing was for me was I rewatched all the episodes of all the hosts we had tonight, and it was just surprising to see how many like quote unquote iconic sketches we have in this list. And like it's not always due to the hosts themselves, but like for the ability to go on YouTube and see at least probably all 3 of these people within probably the first 20 sketches listed. I don't fact check me, but these people tonight, I've watched the sketches from many of these people probably a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen times, because they're 3 minutes and they're really funny. Like the hosts themselves, of course they need to come back. I feel they have to come back multiple times to be part of that list. I mean, there are people on this list that only hosted one time, but they came back in another sense, and that's like to the line a little bit, but I'm not against that. But all the people we had tonight are all like, you look at their SNL episodes or one of their sketches or one of their moments and you go, wow, this was a really big moment in SNL history, or at least something really that a lot of people enjoyed, and that's pretty good way to put it. So
Yeah, I love that. And it raises the question, right? Does the snowball of people talking about a host turn them into an iconic host?
mhm.
So, like when you go back and you watch and you evaluate, it's like, are they actually doing a great job, or is the idea of what they did at the show so impactful that people perceive them as doing a great job? And I think those are the things we try and parse through when we are going through each of these hosts. So, without further ado, let's get to it. We're now inside the top 25, and we're going to talk about someone here at number 24. And it's interesting.
Oh.
I would say that this is somebody who, as a host, was when this person hosted for the first time, I think it was some of the most excited I've ever seen SNL fans. And they've sort of found a niche or a spot at the show where you might expect them to come back to host.
Mhm.
And it's somebody we've talked about a lot
Can
on the
I can I
podcast over the
do
last few years. So
can I
do you
do
want
the
to do a
reveal?
reveal? Yeah, do the reveal, Brandon. All right.
Yeah.
So if you're watching live on YouTube, take a look.
So yeah, I saw this person perform with Justin Bieber and Usher, which was really interesting. And they had a shirt for sale, so I was like, you know what, I'll buy it, even though, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll buy the shirt. Oh, number 24. Here's our guy. So
Yep, that's right. Dave Chappelle here at number 24. Justin Bieber and Usher. That's it. It's
yeah, I
interesting.
know, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dave Chappelle here at number 24, who hosts in 2016 for the first time, season 42, episode 6, with A Tribe Called Quest, one of the most hyped episodes ever, really, coming into that 2016 election where everything was at a crossroads. Which way is it going to go? And, it almost felt like two shows were made, one in case Hillary won, one in case Trump won. And he was all over it with an iconic monologue and moments that night. Obviously, his experience on the Chappelle show, everyone was just excited to get him back into sketch comedy since he was retired for so long. Has that night that everyone can't stop talking about, then returns 4 years later, right at the beginning of, COVID SNL, November of 2020, where we have the 2020 election. Same spot, comes right in, right after Biden wins with musical guest Foo Fighters. We covered that episode, on the podcast right as we were just starting. There was so much to talk about. The night does a 16-minute monologue. And then 2 years later, they bring him back for the midterms in season 48, episode 6, with musical guest Black Star. So, Haynes, I remember so many conversations we have had over the last 4 years about Dave Chappelle, how big of a fan of Dave Chappelle you are. I will put out the caveat. Obviously, he is a little bit controversial, has said some things that a lot of people have taken offense to, and I understand that. Some people are not happy with, to see him host, but others feel he is one of the most iconic comedic legends of all time and should be hosting many more than 3 times. So let's talk about Dave Chappelle here at 24, Haynes, and let me get your opinion on him and his place on the list. Oh, Haynes, you're muted. Let me get you in here. There you go.
Sorry, I'm in. Yeah. So the way I talk about Dave Chappelle has evolved some in the past few years. I always preface the conversation by saying, this is a guy who has said, several things in the last several years that I don't agree with. And there was a time, basically, for the first 20 years of my fandom, from age like 14 to 34 or something, where he didn't say anything that I didn't agree with. I agree with everything he said for 20 years, So it took a little bit of a turn, but there's no doubt that, in my mind, I don't think a single person has been a bigger comic influence on me. I just, when I first, I saw Half Baked and it was funny, but then those specials were coming out, around that time, in, at 99 and 2002 or 2000 or 2003, when those first specials started coming out. And then, of course, you have Chappelle Show. And I was just blown away by this guy's genius. I still think he's he's got to be, he's one of the funniest people who's ever walked the earth during my time on this planet. And so I was immensely thrilled when we learned that they were bringing him in. Whether you've been offended by him or not over the past few years, I think that I would be surprised if people didn't see him as iconic. I think that there's just a different mark on his legacy, but I don't think he's less iconic. I mean, he's a guy who's just had such an impact in the comic world. And they bring him on. They only bring him on for episode 6. Every time he comes on, it's for episode 6. It's when there's been this major change in our nation, and they bring in this guy who can kind of, rein it all in for everybody. I mean, these are some of my favorite episodes of all time. I don't think anyone does a better monologue than Dave Chappelle. There's a reason that, he gets to do the longest one of all time. I mean, Mulaney's had a really long one, but it didn't top that 16 minutes from Chappelle, right? It's still
the season 46 one is still the longest of all time. I think it's a record that will never be broken. And, we can't talk about that episode without talking about the logistics of, doing SNL in these COVID times that were happening where, you couldn't practice, sketches together. I think the 16 minutes was part because of, we just needed to cut down the segments. So it made sense to just put one guy up there for a monologue for 16 minutes. And given, the nature of what was happening in the world, it just all sort of came together in that way. I can't imagine that producers will ever have somebody come on and just do a set like that. That was just one in a million. You're never gonna see it again, I think.
I mean, he's one of the greatest speakers and storytellers that you can lay your ears on. And so that's why, he was given that privilege. I talked about the impact of monologues. We'll talk about some people who consistently have good monologues. We'll talk about some people who consistently have okay monologues. This man's monologues are not great. They are in a league of their own. I mean, on a different level. Like no one touches the Dave Chappelle monologues. So they're so impactful for that reason. And that's just a little bit of my intro. I'm definitely ready to tear apart the sketches. So many awesome sketches to talk about.
All right, well, let's get Brennan's thoughts on Dave Chappelle here at 24.
So I'm glad you mentioned the monologues. So the first time I ever saw Dave Chappelle live was right after Harambe incident, and he did about 45 minutes on it. He's from that area. He's the Cincinnati area, so I mean it worked well for him. And then I mean it was still probably one of the best comedy shows I've ever been to, I've ever seen. I personally have always been a big fan of Dave Chappelle since like my dad showed me the Chappelle Show, just because I've always been a big fan of sketch comedy and all. So I think I saw the Chappelle Show before I even saw SNL. It's pretty iffy. I don't know for sure because I saw the original like before I saw SNL, I saw the DVDs of the best of. So the time there is pretty close between them. But if you're gonna talk about monologues, it's very hard to not put probably all 3 of these Dave Chappelle monologues in like a top 20 list. You could probably fit them all in a top 10 too if you watched every single one. But man, it's really is phenomenal. Like I was rewatching the episodes today, and you only get about 50 minutes if you remove the musical guests, and you even get less when you get rid of Weekend Update. So you probably get about 35-40 minutes of like an actual episode of SNL if you remove the musical guests and the Weekend Update. He's a third of the show, just his monologues for each of his episodes. It's it really is interesting to see. There's very few people that can command the stage that way and like really do a really good job at it, and he's easily one of those people. The last thing is I feel like the season 46 episode, he was doing shows like that week, so he only did like 2-3 days of rehearsal compared to the other 2 episodes where he did all 5 days. So I feel like for him to be another reason that monologue was so long is because he didn't have as much time with the sketches and all. So
Yeah, I feel like I look at his episodes as very different from each other. I know that they're samey in terms of like his brand, but I do feel that season 42 was the full Chappelle experience. Like, I think, if you were, of age to watch Chappelle show when you're younger, like such a big deal, such like a unique voice in comedy, and just like they were doing things that no one else was doing. It was really like of its kind. And, when he went away, there was like this like cult following of people who just were like, when is Chappelle going to come out of retirement? And I've told this story on the podcast before, and Haynes, I jump in a second. I just told a story many times when we did both in 46 and 48 cover his episodes, but I was at the Comedy Cellar in 2013, and I just, with a couple friends, and I just went to like go hang there, and all of a sudden the room, like they were like, hey guys, like we're not going to bring on the comics we said we are, but we got a great surprise for you. And in walks Dave Chappelle. He sits on the piano at the Comedy Cellar, just starts smoking some cigarettes, and he does like a 2-hour set, and he tells everybody like, yeah, he's about to make his comeback and he wants to test out material. And we were like, our minds were blown. Like, this was one of the biggest deals ever. And of course, like only a few years later is he like, selling out stadiums and coming to host Saturday Night Live. So that first episode for me is as iconic as it gets. I have to think, Haynes, if you're going to cut down the almost 1,000 episodes of SNL to the ones that you actually have to watch to understand the story of the 50 seasons, that season 42 episode 6 episode has to be there.
Absolutely. That one really is iconic, and what an incredible story. I mean, that story gives me goosebumps every time you mention it, John. I mean, that's wild. And it kind of gets to the point that I was going to jump in. You've been using this term retirement a little bit liberally, like he was basically like, after he quit Chappelle Show, like Hollywood they were not going to take a risk on him again. Like he was basically blacklisted for a while. He had to work his way back in, but boy, he got him. I mean, what an immense talent. He took Netflix for all their money.
Yes, he did. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's 42 to me. And then 46, obviously very different. Like circumstantially, as Brendan mentioned, he comes in late. He's not really in a lot of the episodes. So he has that, sketch though. I'm sure you guys are going to get into the Fired Mascots one that a lot of people do remember of there, where he does like a Dennis Haysbert voice and stuff like that. And then, season 48, when he comes back a little bit surprisingly, I don't think people necessarily expected him to host the midterms, since he was doing more of the post, presidential election slot. But he comes in there and, with this newer cast, these new people, does a lot of, race humor as you would expect, and really just like goes for it with his sketches. And I almost feel like, 46 is, besides the monologue, almost not a real episode of his. So you kind of have to talk about the first or the third. But let's get into some of these moments, because I know a lot of people have strong opinions about Chappelle, but let's dive really in like through the nitty gritty. What were some moments that really stood out as to why he may be here at 24? So Haynes, you want to pick out a couple sketches that you have on your list?
Yeah. So gosh, I mean, obviously, listen, I mean, the election night sketch, from that first episode he hosted, where we get the Chris Rock appearance. Also, he's kind of, it's a funny scenario where he's talking to these, folks who kind of live in a bubble, and think that there's no possible way that Trump could win this election. It's just a good premise. And then the way they, after Rock shows up, they really, are leaning into the comparison between like the struggles in these bubbled people's worlds versus, everything outside of that bubble, which a lot of other people have experience with. That's an awesome sketch. But I think, listen, I actually think, so the third time that he hosted, I mean, we basically it was essentially an episode of Chappelle Show, like all the sketches, were all Chappelle based. Even if he wasn't in them, he introduced all of them, I think, or at least several of them. It was many of them that he introduced. And, and it was just all, you could tell that he had a hand in everything. It was all the type of humor and from his perspective. And it was an absolute takeover of the show. SNL basically became Chappelle Show for one night, and it was a glorious night. I would never throw away SNL, but for one night to have it be Chappelle Show was like amazing. I loved obviously we start out with the potato hole sketch early in the episode, which was like, I mean, just so it's just classic Chappelle. getting like taking you to that dark place and teaching you something, but giving you all those awkward laughs. I think, when we talk about the with Aunt Jemima, that sketch, the fired mascots. I mean, you can hear the burst of laughs from the audience when Maya says, "But I'm Aunt Jemima." That very first punchline just comes at you so quick as soon as the sketch starts, and the laughs that you hear from the audience are so much harder than other laughs you hear from like normal sketches. I'll say this: every one of those sketches got it is funnier than any of your average SNL sketches. And that's not to say that like Dave Chappelle should come take over the show or anything like that. But those sketches, they're all so good. I mean, even the one like in the barbershop is on a lower tier, I think, than the scene in Heaven where Mikey Day plays Dave Chappelle's part, and he got this white guy playing like a character dressed in kind of pimpish clothes and stuff. But even the barbershop one is still so funny. There's just so I don't know which sketch to start digging into.
No, I mean, I think you did a great job talking about a lot of the really, really, memorable moments from Chappelle. So, Brennan, for you, were there any other ones on your list that you want to bring up?
I mean, we got the ones in the best moments. I wrote down the probably one of the most meta of SNL sketches, the Jerry's Place one, where they have a post sketch press conference, which I am a really big fan of, just the idea of that one and the execution of it, because you watch the Jerry's Place for the first time without knowing like what's gonna happen. It's the same exact like confusion and like what are they doing here, that you watch Daryl's House with Zach Galifianakis for the first
Right.
time.
Yeah.
It's like what are they doing here, like this better have a payoff, and it really does, which is phenomenal, because you have those Jerry Place sketches that don't have a payoff and you go, well, that sucked, but hey, there's another sketch tonight and we'll be fine, we'll keep watching. I'm glad you mentioned the barbershop one. That might be my favorite of the episode, just for how it's played. I just think it's really well done. I mean, it's not like Potato Hole is a bigger laugh, and so does so does Black Heaven, but I feel like Barbershop is the best straight through sketch, because it's got the premise wise is perfectly done by everyone in that one. So I don't think I have anything else. I mean, as someone who had watched all of Chappelle's show, I really liked the Walking Dead one from the first episode. I didn't like House of the Dragon parody as much, but
I didn't either.
It's just
I did actually. I didn't mind it because I thought that I think it's cool.
Works.
Like, I think it's just really cool when you start incorporating old characters. Like once you're bringing back like Rick James or Tyrone Biggums, like you're including them in the world of something else. Like I think that stuff is really well done. Like I'm a big Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon fan, so for me, like it is cool to get to see something like that. But obviously, I think the Walking Dead one is the one that people really enjoyed and was one of the most memorable moments from his first time hosting. And I think that's where I was going to jump in, Brennan, and say that I think, what I look for from hosts, definitely, as far as my criteria is, do you have a signature brand that you bring to the show? And there's no doubt that Chappelle does. He reminds me a lot of what we talked about with Eric Idle. It takes place at a different point in time in history. But, when SNL starts and they're, all big Monty Python fans, and then Eric Idle and Michael Palin host, they want to make the show feel a little bit Python-esque. And I felt like all of the people in the cast, or at least a lot of them, were fans or grew up with Chappelle shows. So for them to get to have between sketches, Dave standing there direct to camera, smoking a cigarette, introducing the next sketch, I think that those are the moments that end up being really iconic from these episodes. And it's something that we just don't see in modern times. Every host nowadays, they come into the SNL machine, but Chappelle, when he hosts the show, the machine becomes his. And I think that that's something that I feel puts him on this list. Is it a little high for me? Probably, just because there's so many great hosts. And I do think that second episode probably it's a little bit tough. But for me, I think he has to be talked about despite the controversies, despite the fact that there are many things that he said that I don't agree with, including things that he said, for me, at least in the season 48 monologue. But I am able to take a step back and look and see how important he is to comedy. And you can't tell the story of comedy without Dave Chappelle in it. So I think, having these 3 episodes on his resume are huge for him.
And so you're absolutely right with I think everything you said is spot on. He doesn't just put his stamp on the show, like he molds it to, he creates his art. He also seems to really like breaking the fourth wall, whether it's on purpose with the Black Heaven, or predetermined, written into the sketch like that, or if it's, it seemed like it was improv, when he points out Pete Davidson, when he asks America to look at Pete Davidson's lips, which is so funny. And you can see Pete having a hard time with that one. But I love all that stuff. Just love it all.
Yeah, I remember before the season 48 episode, obviously, I think it was a year prior, so between his second and his third episode, so probably 2021, if I remember the timeline correctly, where a lot of the controversial comments that he had made during one of his Netflix specials had really got brought to light, and a lot of people were talking about, okay, like, I don't think we're going to see Chappelle come back, and then he was announced as host, and I know that a lot of people in our community were not so excited about it, so I do like to try my best to get the opinion of the people at the show. And I remember texting with one of the cast members and asking, like, hey, what's the vibe like? Are you guys like unhappy that Chappelle is there? And obviously, like, one person can't speak for everybody. But my understanding is, like, these people like really admire Dave Chappelle and they were very excited to have him in the building. It was like a big and special week. And, we talk about season 48, from Keke Palmer through the Pedro Pascal episode as being like one of the best modern day runs we've seen. But I do think the, Chappelle coming in and sort of giving everybody a little bit of a kick in the ass, like, helped season 48 get back on track. So I do want to mention that as something important. I also bumped into Donnell Rawlings last year at Just for Laughs, and we were talking about the episode, and he just says, like, look, every time I go there and I write with Dave, like, we have the time of our lives. So he thinks they're going to be back at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him in 50. Like, Haynes, I think we might get him after the 2024 election. What do you think?
It's obviously not an insane call, like it just, it seems it almost seems too predictable in a way, right? So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Where do you think he'll pop up in 50, Brennan, if you had to predict, if at all?
I mean, like I said, he's either gonna show up for that 50 special, which I feel like he has to. Otherwise, if you say it's a missed opportunity for him to not host the post 2024 election episode, then like it really seems like it's been working really, really well for him to host a post-election episode. And if they have another plan, so be it. But if not, it's pretty easy choice for who to host.
Yeah, and I'm just taking a look actually at the, I know he will only host episode 6. So at the current schedule that we have out right now, season 50 episode 6 would be November 9th. So the 2024 general election, just taking a look here, is let me see if the timing works out. November 5th. All right. Yep, exactly. So all set up for him. So we do have that as currently planned. All right. As far as the criteria that we look at every week when evaluating these hosts, could this host be a cast member? I think so. I think maybe not now, but back in the day, certainly he would have been one of the more unique cast members in SNL history, but there's nothing wrong with that. Does he have a defining characteristic he brings to the show? Absolutely. Can he work with multiple casts? That's an interesting question here. Does he work well with cast members? I do believe he definitely works with cast members. I think he puts cast members in spots that really facilitate his comedy moving forward. So putting a Mikey Day in that white role, a Michael Longfellow, I think that would probably work in any era, right, Haynes? No matter if he was hosting in 2006 or 1986.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he checks all the boxes of what you look for. From an analytics perspective, 6.0 SPE, that is very, very low, I would say, for a modern day host. So I have to dock a couple points there, but clearly with a
Mhm.
long monologue, you sort of bump it back up. So, 60-minute monologue, what do you expect? Also hosting during COVID lowers it as well. So, it's one of those things you have to take it with a grain of salt. From a legacy perspective, despite how anyone may feel about Dave Chappelle, good or bad, you have to say he has one of the biggest legacies in modern day times. He has a spot at the show that's pretty much reserved for him, which is hosting after a big major event in American politics, and has had some really iconic moments. So for me, he does check all the boxes that you would look for when you're talking about putting him on this list. So let's do final thoughts on Dave Chappelle here at 24. Brennan, let's start with you.
I would say deserved on the list for sure. Depends what you're looking for in a host, on how high you want him to be on that list. I think he automatically deserves a spot in the 50. But if you're looking for someone that is in more sketches, then he's going to be lower on the list. But for quality of sketches and quality of monologues, he is very, very high up.
Haynes, final words on Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're ever going to find anyone delivering a better monologue than Dave Chappelle, and that's why they give him such a large chunk of the episode. He's not just one of the biggest comedians of our time, but he and then showing up on the show, but he has made an impact on the show, as you said. That third episode was straight up Chappelle show. He crafts the episode to fit him. It's more than a stamp. And he creates tons of iconic moments. Yes, seeing him there sitting, smoking the cigarette, but also in the sketches. I mean, we just created really memorable sketches, and not just playing the hits with the characters on Walking Dead, Chappelle show. I think you've got some really memorable stuff in there. So to me, he absolutely deserves to be on the list. And I'm sure that sometime in the top 23, I'll see a host that I think should be below him.
All right, we'll see if that comes up next when we get to number 23 on the list. This is someone I'm really excited to talk about. We don't get to talk about this person that much on our podcast regularly, and that's because it's been a while since we've seen them host the show, but they have been a big part of SNL history, hosting 4 times previously. And let's talk about someone else who has a little bit of controversy, I'd say. But yeah, here comes Lindsay Lohan here at 23. This was somebody who hosted the show, and at the time they hosted was maybe the biggest celebrity in the world. Just so important, back in the day, where they hosted 3 seasons in a row. Season 29, episode 18 with musical guest Usher in 2004. Season 30, episode 20 in 2005 with musical guest Coldplay. Returns for her 3rd season in a row. In season 31, episode 16 in 2006 with Pearl Jam. And then, Lindsay had some troubles, didn't return for a while, but we do get her back in season 37, episode 16 in 2012 with Jack White, and has not been seen since, though I know the Lindsay Lohan fans out there are dying to see her come back to the show to get that 5-timers jacket, because she was, like I said, as big of a deal as it gets. So many fans and so many moments that we have to talk about from her time at Saturday Night Live. So, Brennan, let's start with your thoughts on Lindsay here at 23.
Well, first off, I think that 5-timers jacket is coming if they know what to do when Freaky Friday 2 comes out next year. I don't remember if it comes out spring or fall, but either it's going to be season 50 or season 51, because I think she's got to be back on the show, because I rewatched all 4 of these episodes today, and man, they are really pretty dang good episodes. And while we just talked about someone who pretty much controls all the sketches they're in, Lindsay Lohan does a really good job at filling in whatever spot they wanted her to be in, outside of the monologue, which I'll get to later. But all these episodes are really pretty good, and I was a little young to really know a lot about Lindsay Lohan. Like, of course, I watched Freaky Friday when that came out, Parent Trap. I mean, years after, like, it's weird to say years after that came out, but I was born in '98, so like I didn't watch it until like 2000, whatever. Anyway, Lindsay Lohan is a really good SNL host. I don't really know what to say. I feel like this is a really comfortable spot for her, and I was not upset to see her on this list at all. So
Yeah, it's fascinating because Lindsay was a phenomenon. I was in, I guess, the later part of elementary school when she was hosting these 3 seasons in a row, and it was as big of a deal, to get her on anything. The tabloids, I mean, she talks about this in her monologues, but the tabloids, the media, like, it was Lindsay mania. And that first show is obviously, right. I think maybe a few days after Mean Girls gets released, like, she is a huge deal. And obviously, the spotlight did come to affect her, and I have to wonder, if it didn't, if she would have hosted way more times than 4, because we sometimes, Haynes, talk about the disparity between men hosting SNL and women hosting SNL in terms of its history. And I do believe that, for someone who comes in, who starts at 17 years old hosting Saturday Night Live, does it for a few seasons in a row, she was on a trajectory to potentially be the woman that was going to host SNL the most in its history. And because of off-screen things, she doesn't get there. And we don't think she will at this point, but her story may not be over. So I would love to know your thoughts on Lindsay Lohan as a host here at 23.
No, her story may not be over, but it certainly, kind of for a while has felt like that ship has sailed. But listen, I mean, people live long lives. She could become the next Betty White. We don't know if when she's 75, like all of a sudden there could, like it seemed like, I mean, Dolly Parton was huge, and then she was just kind of in the background for 15 or 20 years, and then she came back and she's the biggest thing in the world. Who knows? Something like that could happen with Lindsay Lohan. And God bless her. I wish her all the best in the world. I think I'm a year older than her. I think I was a freshman in college when she started, when she hosted this first episode. I do think I've found someone who should be further down the list than Dave Chappelle.
Ooh, okay. Interesting.
I think that, so this was kind of the thing that I was talking about when I said, I mean, listen, I don't think she did a bad job hosting any episode, but like, I think her monologues are all okay. I don't think they're particularly good. I don't think they're bad, but they're okay. Monologues are okay. She she hosted several episodes, but she was in a lot of movies. It's a cycle. She wasn't. I think she does a fine job in a lot of sketches, but to me, even though the characters are written differently, her acting is a little bit one note. I kind of see that same kind of Lindsay Lohan tone coming through with a lot of her characters, and I think that those characters could have been played more creatively. I think that some of the best sketches that she was in really had nothing to do with her. I mean, Debbie Downer was all Rachel Dratch. I mean, it's funny that Lindsay Lohan broke, but everyone else broke. I mean, Rachel Dratch owned that sketch. I think one of the funniest sketches she's ever been in was that one, I forget the name of it, where it's basically like a bunch of like 1950s style, like
delinquent girls.
Delinquent girls. Yes, the greasers. And Fred Armisen keeps getting hit by cars. That's an amazing sketch, but it's not because of Lindsay. And she does fine. She doesn't do anything wrong in that sketch, but like Fred Armisen is what I remember about it. So, and I think she's in a lot of fun sketches. I do think that Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph, Zach Galifianakis, I mean, I think those are all people who might be better hosts overall than Lindsay Lohan.
So this is one of those times, and this may be, I have to think about other times on this list as it happened, but it's one of those times where I do feel if I was giving you my list of the best hosts of all time, I do think that Lindsay Lohan has a lot of trouble making that list for me. She hosts at a pretty young age. She, like you said, she is pretty one note in her performances. I think there's a couple of sketches where she really does anchor and shows that she has the chops to do it. But I don't know that that necessarily like all of her best moments come through the ones where she's playing the A role. So for me, I think that best in terms of her actual ability to host the show is lower than some of the people we have already talked about. But as far as greatness and legacy is concerned, I think that's extremely high here. She's in some really iconic moments. The Debbie Downer sketch, despite her not being the focal point of it, is still something that people will remember her being in. And I do believe that Lindsay Lohan being so popular helped that sketch grow to what it ended up being. So I can't completely discount her role in it.
And I don't either, because I do think that it's an important point that you make, that when we remember the sketch, we'll remember that she was there. So like her face is in that sketch. Her face is part of this funny moment in time. So that counts for something when we're talking about legacy here at SNL.
Yeah. And also, another sketch that, again, I need to tell our friends who helped us, who helped create this graphic. We have to put the Hermione sketch on this one. I know it's like it's a little bit exploitive.
It's problematic.
Problematic. It is very.
It's not honestly, is it problematic? I mean, she totally was like.
She's 17 when that comes out, which is the first thing I noticed when I rewatched it. So,
I guess that's true, but is it like? I guess I don't know if they could do that sketch now, because would they do that sketch now with somebody who's under 18 is a good question. I mean, obviously she has to agree to do the sketch. There are I don't even know what the right way to say this is, so I want to be careful. But basically, like, there are people who are under 18 now that, obviously are like teen icons for being beautiful. So I do think, like, exploiting somebody's looks when they're under 18, like, what is the correct way for SNL to go about that? Like, it's a weird question. Back in 2004, it was seen as a very funny sketch that, like, it was, if you don't remember it, this is like, Harry Potter mania is everywhere. Rachel Dratch is playing Harry Potter, who comes back, to school, to Hogwarts after summer break, and Lindsay Lohan as Hermione has gone through puberty and has clearly grown, and just like everybody reacting to seeing Lindsay Lohan as Hermione. It was something that I just think was passed around, and obviously it's like not just the Hermione thing and the joke, but it's also like, how Lindsay Lohan was like sort of a sexual icon at the time, despite her age. So I do think like it's one that we can't not talk about.
Listen, I was 18 years old at the time, and she's a redhead, so representation. And I thought she was like the hottest chick ever. Like when we were seniors in high school, like me and my best friend, who's also redhead, we were like, Lindsay Lohan is going to take our people somewhere. Like that's the way we felt.
She is your god.
That's the way we felt about Lindsay Lohan. So I was a big fan. And yes, as a teenage, an 18-year-old boy, the Hermione sketch like said everything that a lot of people were thinking at the time. But I don't think I'm glad I don't think that we would do that with someone under the age of 18 now, and I would hope that we wouldn't. I don't like the idea of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that there's other really good moments from her that I've, going through these episodes. Brennan, for you, were there any ones that you want to point out from some of the times that Lindsay hosted?
So one thing I wrote down that was really interesting was, I don't remember a host that has their monologues so pointed towards what's going on in their life as Lindsay Lohan. Because like the first episode or the second episode has, the first episode I don't remember, but the second one, either order. One of them is her fighting with like Haley Duff and
Hilary Duff. Yeah, that's the
Hilary
that's
Duff and
Avril Lavigne.
Avril Lavigne, and then there's one about her, like, of course, like getting in. They're all about like what's going on in her life, and they're not all squeaky clean things to talk about. But it's interesting to see them focus so hard on it for the monologues. There's the one where she's it's a version of herself played by an older version of herself played by Amy Poehler, and they're like telling her like, hey, you don't like don't keep going the way you're doing. Ha ha ha. It's really that was one thing that I took notice of right away when I was
Yeah.
rewatching her stuff.
I mean, it's a little bit sad that like
Mhm.
basically that sketch came true, you know? And she's like, "Well, am I at least happy in 30 years? I don't know. I'm from 7 years from now." You
Yeah.
know, it's like pretty much like what happened. I'm sorry, guys. I need to grab a charger. I didn't
No
plug
problem.
in.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh-oh.
I'll keep going. So
Well,
yeah, no
I
stress.
got other stuff to talk about. Yeah.
Go ahead, Brennan. Yeah.
So yeah, like just rewatching her stuff. As I said before, sometimes she's the focal point of the sketch. Other times she's the B player in here, and that's perfectly okay. But it doesn't make any of them like terrible sketches. There's a lot of really, really funny sketches that I know I rewatched many times. Like one that you don't have listed is the 2012 Psychic Awards, where I don't even remember if she has more than one line in that, but it's such a funny sketch about how it ends with them being an in memoriam of the Psychic Awards themselves because they start a fire. I thought that was hilarious. I love that one. I also really like the one that Haynes mentioned was the Delinquent Girls with Fred Armisen, who's the main guy for that one. And then another one from season 37, which as a Minnesota guy, I really like the B108 radio show sketch where it's 5 o'clock in the morning in winter in Minnesota, and it's just
Oh yeah.
so terrible outside. And I felt that one to my core. It's so well done.
I love that sketch, and there's a line, you know, because it's so like early morning,
Mhm.
very late night, very early morning radio is like such a depressing time to
Yeah.
be on the radio. As a former like college radio host who has hosted a lot of different time slots, that's such a depressing time to be on the air. And when the dudes are like, "Yeah, it's about 5 a.m. The constellations are still technically discernible," like it's just so funny to me.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's a good
very good.
I will say, like, I think it's really interesting when she hosts, right? Because she hosts these 3 seasons in a row, and they're generally seen as like, at least for 29 and 30, not the greatest seasons in SNL history. This is like the post 9/11 Tina Fey led, era episodes, and it's very heavy pop culture based, and you definitely see that in the episodes. Most of the comedy is mined through things that are happening. Like, you really had to be tapped into pop culture to get everything that's been going on in these episodes. And a lot of the episodes from 29 and 30 specifically are pretty tough to go back on a rewatch. But I do think that Lindsay's episodes are better
Mhm.
probably because of her versus some of the other ones in that season. 31, I think they're on their path to like recovery, and obviously 32 onward I think are fantastic. So
Mhm. You get
it's great to
Kristen
get
Wiig in 31, so yeah. And
exactly. And
Will Forte. I mean,
for
Will
sure.
Forte was in earlier, but still them
But
together.
as
So.
having more lead roles, definitely, and
Mhm.
you get to see it right away, especially in the third episode where you get the Neutrogena coin slot cream with Kristen and stuff. Like,
I
oh
was
yeah,
gonna
okay,
mention now. That's a
yeah.
funny commercial. That's
Yeah.
funny.
It's a very funny commercial. I think it's a great one. And there's
Yeah.
some really good moments there. I mean, she's in the Laser Cat sketch.
Mhm.
There's one that we have to talk about, which is her, Kristen, and Will together in these
Yes.
like Gene and Neil
That was
sketches where
really
they
funny.
where they go to bars together, and
Oh yeah.
that type of thing. Such a like that's like such an underrated characters for Will and Kristen. But that one is a really good version of that sketch that they're going to do many
Mhm.
times. I remember one with Steve Martin that they did. Like, there's a few of them that are really good, but that Lindsay Lohan one I think is the first one, and it's very solid from season 31. And then the fact that she comes back so many years later, where SNL is in such a completely different place, and it's funny because like I almost feel like Lindsay is even better in season 37.
Mhm.
But like the episode probably maybe isn't as strong specifically. So I think it's interesting to see to talk about her as a host and her 4 episodes, between the contrast of her as a host versus the episode quality. I think is a little bit drastic when viewing these. So yeah, overall for me though, guys, I think Lindsay Lohan, could she have been a cast member? I think it's probably a little tough to say. I think she was probably right where she should be, in these like great movie roles. I see her as a very good host of the show. I don't know if I see her having the range to be a cast member, though it is a little bit unfair to say because I think she would have been, 17 years old coming to host. Like she's the same age as like Anthony Michael Hall, right? Like it's like she's not there fully, able to flex her chops. And we do get to see in 2012, after she's gone through some stuff, that she has some more range that she could provide to the show. Does she have a brand though? Absolutely. I definitely see the Lindsay Lohan brand when she brings it to the show. And I think it would be really, really fun to have her come back and host again at some point. If it's in 50, I think that would be a good look back. Can you work with multiple casts? Where we do have a good example here of her being, sort of in this era that's, all consistent back to back to back. And then we get her with a very different cast in season 37. So I do like that we have some evidence of this. And then from an analytics perspective, 7.75 SP, that's pretty good. She's in a lot of unique sketches, very different roles in some of the sketches. I think back to like one that isn't on this list that I do want to point out as like a very interesting Lindsay Lohan showcase. I believe this is in her second episode, season 30, episode 20. But near the end of the episode, there's like an Italian family sketch. It's sort of like Sopranos-esque where she's playing.
Yeah, I wrote that one down.
Yeah, you wrote that one down, Brendan? Yeah, like she's playing Horatio's wife who like catches him cheating and basically is like throwing all of his like expensive stuff out, and she's really anchoring that sketch. And I think it's like a good example of like, okay, she's like really like getting into the SNL world and being able to take care of that. And from a legacy perspective, I think it's really high. Like I definitely see on social media whenever we post like, who do you want to see host? The Lindsay fans like come out. They want to see her back on SNL. So for me, I think that we will see Lindsay Lohan again. Haynes, do you think it's going to happen?
If I were a betting man, I see SNL having a long future. And I would say, I think someday Lindsay Lohan does get in here a fifth time. I think she does.
Brennan, what is your guess?
Well, just like you said for the Lindsay fans, they wanted her to host for the Irish Wish movie that she did on Netflix in the spring, which I watched. It was fine, but like I said, I want to see her back. Mostly just because it would be an interesting, fun, not juxtaposition, but like this is someone that has a lot of episodes, and we've been waiting for that fifth episode. And I said before, Freaky Friday 2, it should work.
Yeah. I mean, we have to talk about the fact that she's hosted 4 times, seems to be in a pretty good place right now from, all things considered. I believe she's married and has a kid, if I understand correctly. And as far as like 4-time hosts are concerned, when we're talking about like who may get into the 5-timers club during season 50, Eric Idle and Michael Palin, I don't see it. Paul Simon, they sort of put him in already. Ashton Kutcher, I don't imagine. Dana Carvey, I think, is the number 1 pick on the board. Cameron Diaz is sort of retired a little bit. Louis C.K. and James Franco are not coming back. Yeah. Charles Barkley, maybe, potentially. Marty, I'd say for sure. And then Adam Driver, will he do back-to-back seasons? I think Lindsay Lohan has to be in that mix of people that we can see if they definitely want more women in the 5-timers club. She's the top pick on the board. So I would be interested to seeing her come back here. So, Brennan, let's get final word on Lindsay Lohan here at 23.
Like I don't want to speak too highly on her, but very, very competent host that has a pretty like top 5 episode of each of these seasons that she's in. Very memorable sketches. Easily someone to put in the top 50. It's going to be debatable on what you think, how high she should be on that list. Just like the last guy, there's a lot of leeway here on opinions and a lot of what you want in a memorable top 50 host. This is someone that did a lot of sketches that a lot of people have watched, and I thought all the sketches were pretty good. I like that she's on this list. Would I have talked about another person in this spot? Yes. Would I have talked about her if she was higher up? Sure. Would I have talked about her if she was lower on this list? Yes. Would I have talked about her if she wasn't on this list? I would have been mad that she wasn't on this list, but that's about it. So,
okay, Haynes, final word on Lindsay Lohan at 23.
I echo a lot of what Brennan just said. I mean, I would absolutely put her in the top 50. She's had a large impact on the show with these 4 episodes. Now they're kind of squished together a little bit. I mean, an 8-year period or something, but she had a significant impact on the show, and like Brennan said, I think she's absolutely competent. And she has moments. I don't know that I would have her quite as high as we've got her right now. There've just been so many amazing hosts on the show, but I would welcome her back. And even though, and I don't like to, like judge people's lives too much, whether they've got, whatever struggles or trauma they've gone through. I don't think, without knowing the person in their situation, like we can't, we really can't judge even whether or not like parts of her life really are a struggle or not. Like we don't, like she's doing great, or like who are any of us to say, like what's been going on in her life. But I still think there's an aspect of redemption if she comes back for a fifth, to get that fifth jacket, only because it was those 4 shows, bang, 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 bang. I mean, a break before the 4th one, but after, which is the original redemption show, I guess. But you have these 4. Now it's been a really long time, and I think that we all kind of would welcome her back, and champion a 5th appearance for her, to wear that jacket. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I think if Lindsay Lohan's name pops up as a host in season 50, I think we're all really excited about it. So it's like a win-win situation for the show. And I hope the show hasn't forgotten about her. I know that they brought her back in 2012 as like hey, you're doing well, let's bring you back. Like, this is great. But it's been 12 years. I think, now's the time. If you're going to dig into SNL history and bring people back from different eras, I think she represents an era that maybe isn't beloved, but she may be one of the most beloved parts of that era. So here we go. Lindsay Lohan at 23. All right, one more host to talk about tonight here on the show. And up next at number 22 is definitely one of my favorite hosts of all time, one of my favorite people of all time, because this guy just makes me laugh more than anyone else. Truly, everything he does is great on the show, and he just fits so well into the SNL world. And that is at number 22, a member of the 5-Timers Club, is Paul Rudd. Here we go. Let's talk about Paul here at 22, who hosts for the first time in 2008, season 34, episode 8, in a very, very memorable episode with musical guest Beyonce. Returns a couple years later for the Christmas episode with Paul McCartney, season 36, episode 9. Then 3 years later, in one of the December episodes with musical guest One Direction. A lot of great moments from that episode as well. Returns 5 years later for the season finale with musical guest DJ Khaled, season 44, episode 21. And it just felt like every episode of Paul Rudd's was so memorable, so iconic, that they had to bring him back for season 47, episode 9, in the most unique episode in SNL history, where the show was almost canceled, except they went live to give him his jacket and introduce some pre-recorded sketches and old moments. And we that day, if you weren't with us during the podcast at the time of season 47, episode 9, I highly invite you to go back and watch the Hot Take show from that night, because we had the craziest day of being updated about all the changes of, is this show going to happen? What's going to happen? All that stuff. And he ended up getting the jacket. I still think it's the craziest episode of all time, potentially. But here we go. Paul Rudd here at number 22, a 5-timer nonetheless. Haynes, what are your thoughts here on Paul at 22?
I mean, love Paul Rudd. Think he's hilarious. Just like you said, always makes me laugh. Just seems like a nice guy. You never see like a bitter, cranky side of him. Just seems like a fun-loving person who really enjoys making people laugh. Man, and so this is a guy who's always got a good monologue. Always a good monologue. Like I talked about okay monologues and great monologues. His are always good. They're good monologues. You can count on a Paul Rudd monologue. It's not going to be, it's not going to be a big stinking fart. You can always count on a good monologue from Paul Rudd. That episode where he gets his 5-timers jacket, absolutely one of the most interesting moments in SNL history, and a flat out terrible 90 minutes of television. I mean, that is a horrible episode.
But it's not his fault.
I know it's not his fault at all. It's not his fault at all. Yeah, but it's just such an unpleasant episode. To have these. We got a couple of new pre-tapes, and then they bring on some old sketches and stuff, and there's just no magic without the audience there. I mean, it's a rough episode, but Paul Rudd, very excited to see him on the list. It really gets hard, I think, when we start getting into this upper echelon of hosts, to really pick exactly where a person goes. But man, I like Paul Rudd a lot, and he's had some great episodes with a lot of great sketches. So very excited to dig in here.
Yeah, I think he is an upper echelon host for sure. And maybe the most underrated upper echelon host that we have. People don't talk about him because he's so famous outside of the show that I think he's not as easily associated with Saturday Night Live. But if you dive into his episodes, I mean, barring, besides the season 47 episode, which again is impossible to judge and not his fault, these 4 episodes of his are like great episodes of the show. There are moments in all of them that I think are fantastic. And I do think that, he's in a really solid spot here on the list. Brennan, your thoughts on Paul Rudd?
Well, what I was going to say is I would have expanded this graphic for sure. Probably about 15 best moments because Paul Rudd, exactly, phenomenal host. Now, here's something crazy. He's such a good host that when they announced that season 47 episode, I was like, oh, cool, Paul Rudd's back. And then everyone had to tell me it was a 5-timer episode because I just didn't think about it. Because he's just, I mean, of course the guest appearances count too, but he's such a good host. It's honestly hard to imagine that SNL got it right by putting him on the show 5 times. You would think they'd forget eventually because he has 4 really good episodes, and on the 5th episode you get Christmas socks or shoes, which I thought was awesome that nobody liked, and then you get the Home Goods sketch, which is pretty cute, and that's all the Home Goods pre-tape. And if you get those 2 in a regular episode, it's already a good episode. So
I'm the director. My name is Casey Homegoods, and I got this job on merit.
Exactly. Phenomenal.
I also think he has amazing guest appearances. I know we're evaluating his times hosting, but even him coming back for the Mulaney one where he Mulaney gets the 5-timers jacket and it's hey, to give him Paul Rudd's jacket. That's the thing that I think is there's, he's so game. He was just back in the Kristen Wiig monologue. To me, he embraces Saturday Night Live like some of the all-time greats in the show history. So I just think we need to give him the credit that he's due. And I think for this one, it would be really cool to talk about some of the moments from each episode and sort of go through it. So, for season 34, episode 8 with Beyonce, I remember watching that episode in November of 2008. And that one was we walked away from that episode wondering if that was one of the best episodes ever. Just how many moments were so cool from that one. When we had Bobby Moynihan on the podcast, we talked to him about what went into creating the Beyonce, Single Ladies music video. And that moment, Brendan, you want to say something?
There's something glaringly missing from the best moments here.
Okay, well, let's put a pin in that because I want to get back to you for some moments here because yes, of course, there's so many here, but that Beyonce music video one with Justin Timberlake and the We're the Dancers and that moment there. I mean, everybody was talking about it. And I know it's Beyonce and JT are in it, so Paul Rudd isn't necessarily the focal point, but he is an important part of that one. And it's just facilitating the atmosphere of great Saturday Night Live, I think, is what makes him, by definition, a great host. So for you, Haynes, any moments from that first episode that you remember?
I mean, Everyone's a Critic is a masterpiece. That is a masterpiece. It's a triple development story, right? We could have had a sketch that just
it could have ended after they painted them.
That's what I'm saying. We could have just parodied that scene from Titanic, and we would have been able to make a great sketch out of it. There would have been enough moments there, right? And
then it could have, I'm saying, not even create a good sketch. It could have ended after that. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Absolutely,
Mhm.
I'm 100% with you. It has 3 clear installations through the process of the sketch, and so then we go on to, Paul Rudd's now an artist, and they go into this great auction at Sotheby's or whatever it is, hosted by Fred Armisen. And I love gag blood spray. I love it. We didn't talk about something we didn't talk about with Chappelle, but there's a football sketch where
oh,
he's like he's feeding
the breastfeeding
yeah
one. Yeah,
yeah
I had
he's
that on
feeding
my
from
list.
Leslie Jones' breast, yeah, and she's squirting milk all over everybody. I love that gag stuff. Love it. So the blood spraying everywhere, all the people dying, it's so extreme, so awesome. And now we've got a whole second sketch basically merged into one. And then it goes full meta, and they pull out, and they're like, "Well, that was a scene from your new movie, blah blah blah." And then here they are, like talking to Casey Wilson, being interviewed, whatever that show that.
Just
Uh,
inside.
yes, that James Lipton used to host, yeah. And then they pull out the art, and of course, her eyes bleed, and the guy with the boom mic falls over, and I mean, it is a masterpiece. To have these. I mean, they really stacked it up. And if you'd only done 2 things, it might have felt too weird, right? That this thing was split in 2, that you had this part and then you had the second part. And wow, they really tacked that on there. But building it up 3 stories, I mean, it towers above other sketches. I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's they painted one. It was fantastic, and that is again a really good episode. A couple other things from season 34, episode 8 that I love. I know not everybody's a fan of the Vogel checks. I think the Vogel checks are absolutely hilarious. Brennan, you like them too?
Yeah, I was booing the people that aren't a fan of them. They just don't get it. They hate how loving the family is. They say it in the sketch. Come on.
Yes, absolutely. You can't help it. We're vocal checks, and
Yeah.
I think I know the gag can be like a little one note for people, but I think it is like so good. It's like it's one of those sketches that I do think back of when I think of that era. And then in that episode is maybe my favorite recurring sketch that nobody talks about from that era, which is the song Memories sketch, where we get is that the one you were thinking of, Brennan, before
Yep.
this? Yeah. So
Yeah.
those sketches to me are so fun. You can't find them anywhere on YouTube because of song rights and stuff like that. But essentially the premise here is you'll get, Bill Hader and Will Forte and Sudeikis and a host, and they're all sitting around, basically telling stories that get crazier and crazier. But the second that the chorus hits, they'll all just sing it super loudly. And I don't know what about it makes me laugh so hard, but it just clicks for me in a way that some other sketches don't. That every time they sing the chorus, it's just so catchy, and it's just a mix of like feel good but also hilariously weird. And Paul Rudd was so perfect for that sketch, Brendan.
Yeah, it's all non sequitur or like one-liner jokes, and I think that adds to it for sure, because you don't have to make a full sketch of that joke. You can, like, it's each person telling a little, like either like a tiny stand-up routine joke or just like a joke that has like a twist ending at the end. It's just perfect, and then it just keeps they all sing along. Like I mean, the one I like more is the Wild World one. I remember that one more than than this one. I forgot about this one until I rewatched it, but the song memory sketches are so well done.
Yeah, so good. In that second episode, we get a couple of really good moments as well, including we get another Vogel check. So we get the stumbling digital short, which a lot of people really do love, with Paul McCartney in there. We get the the monologue where Paul Rudd gets confused with Paul McCartney and Paul Britton. So that's like a really fun moment. We also get the What's That Name sketch. A lot of people will remember the one with Justin Timberlake the following year, but the original What's That Name with Bill Hader's Vince Blight is very great. So there's some solid moments there. Anything else for you guys from that second episode?
Listen, I love the What's That Name sketch, although I think the version with Mulaney maybe is the best.
Yeah.
But I think this was, and I know we're talking about the second episode now, but to not leave the first episode completely behind.
Okay.
And I think this was the first episode, was and one of our and it was an absolute favorite of mine, and one of our followers brought it up too. I Heart Hater mentioned the 2 parking attendants, the gay lovers that start out like making fun of like the gay pride parade or something.
Yeah,
or
whatever that
like,
one was. That was great.
and they're like busting their chops, and they're it's not for me, and they're kind of making jokes about everything, and it culminates with like Andy actually getting down and proposing to him, and then him calling his parents to tell them the good news, and I already called to ask their permission. Oh, they got a good laugh out of it, blah blah blah. And that's just a very fun, warm sketch that I enjoy a lot.
Yeah, that's another good one. Moving on to his third episode with One Direction. This was a huge deal. I mean, One Direction this is like as big as it gets for One Direction, and as terms of them being on the show and their popularity. And then you have Anchorman, returning to theaters, and then we get the whole Anchorman crew that returns. So we get Will Ferrell, we get Keckner back at the show, which is like nobody ever thought that would happen. So then we get like the whole One Direction crew versus Anchorman crew in that monologue there, and it's so good. A lot of people also remember the Paul Rudd pre-tape where he's One Direction's #1 fan, and they're like going to sign something, and it's like for his kid, but it's actually for him. And then of course, the return of Bill Brasky at the end of the episode is so fantastic as well. So these moments were like, I think, season 39, episode 8 might even be his best episode. And then I we have to mention the sketch that's right in the smack dab in the middle of the best moments one. And Brendan, I know as a music fan, you must love this one with him and Vanessa Bayer sitting at a table, getting with their lawyers, getting divorced. And then, the cell phone rings and it's their song, and they don't realize that it's a cell phone, but they keep hearing the song, and the song
just
makes them
me
fall
happy.
back in love with each other again. It's an amazing sketch, and it's one of Vanessa Bayer's best sketches, I think, ever. Her and Paul Rudd, working off of each other. So that one for me is absolutely fantastic. So I feel like season 39, again, another great episode. And then of course season 44 comes back for the finale, and just we get to see him in a Close Encounters sketch. We get Lily Tomlin randomly in the episode for a Grace and Frankie thing, and the sketch here, What's Wrong with This Picture, a very funny sketch as well. So anything from that season 44 episode, Brennan, that you liked?
Well, I'm trying to remember first off if it's episode 2 or 3, but the standout one that had me laughing so hard I was clutching my chest was the don't sketch where
he's gonna jump.
where Paul Rudd's gonna jump, and they have the guys that are trying to prevent it, and like the way they try to stop him is just go don't over and over. I couldn't remember if it was the second episode or the third episode, but that one had me in literal stitches.
Actually, I think that's from his first episode too. That's
probably it's such a Will Forte part too, to just like bark a word over and over again. Don't. The same way he does during the 1-800-555.
Oh yeah.
Again.
It's like him with the spelling bee sketch as well. That's like a very Forte-esque thing to do. But that's a great one that I miss, Brennan. I mean, there's so many good ones from Paul Rudd, and that's why I sort of wanted to go through all the episodes, because for me, I don't think he has a bad one. And like that's what you're really looking for on this list when you're talking about great hosts of all time. You're looking like, what's the batting average here? And I think he delivers. I think he's a big reason why his episodes are so great. Obviously, he has some amazing musical guests that are a big part, but he's just such a great facilitator that I think, he plays the role of a host as good as it gets. So, for me, for some of the criteria I look at, like, could he be a cast member? I think absolutely. Paul Rudd in another universe could have been an amazing cast member on Saturday Night Live. Like, even going back to, him playing Mike on Friends, like, I still think he had like the chops then to be on SNL. So I definitely could see it. Does he have a brand that he brings to the show? What's interesting here is I don't know if Paul Rudd has a brand that he brings to the show, because he's just so vanilla in the best way possible that he's just like, he can basically morph into whatever you need him. So that may hurt him on the list.
I don't know if it does, because it's just such a casual, like, laid back, like, fun thing with Paul Rudd. I mean, I don't know that there's someone else whose casual, laid back, fun brand is exactly like his. So even though it's vanilla, it's like, I think it's kind of his vanilla. So I wouldn't hold it too much against him, but just a great host overall, I think.
Yeah, and can he work with multiple casts? Like, obviously, his hosting spans, if we're going to count 2021, over a span of, almost 15 years, and has even come back, like, through this past season. So for me, I don't think he has any problem working with multiple casts. So he checks really a lot of those boxes. Analytically, he has some great analytics, in a ton of sketches, does some impressions. He has a recurring character in the vocal check sketch, 8.6 SP, definitely above average. So really solid. Also in the 5-timers club. And from a legacy perspective, very much has a strong legacy at the show. I think he's somebody who I absolutely can see coming back for 50 at some point. It's been a few years since he hosted and really hosted. And in all reality, he hasn't hosted since 2019. So, it would be nice to have him back at the show at some point. So I think he checks a lot of the boxes, and he's, for the first time in a while, I think we're talking about a real upper echelon host here. And somebody who at the end of this whole exercise will be closer to the top of my list than the bottom of it. So let's do final words on Paul Rudd and anything else we didn't talk about from his time at the show. Brendan, starting with you.
Yeah, this is one where the other times we were talking about what you see in a host that would put it on the list. This guy checks all the boxes here. So it's like 22 is, you could say, yeah, that number works, but then when you get to the nitty gritty of it, you're like, oh, he did a lot of things really, really well. So you could have had him higher we could have had him higher on the list for sure. So
yeah, I think he's going to be in my top 20. Like, after all is said and done, I could definitely see him there. Haynes, for you, final thoughts on Paul Rudd here at 22.
Would not have a problem at all if we were looking at him like at number 19 or something overall. Would not have a problem with that at all. I think he is. I just think he's just so well rounded as a host. He, like you said, he can. I think he can go across multiple casts. I think he could have been a cast member. I think he's always got a good monologue, and he really nails all of his sketches. I never really see him fall flat in a sketch. I mean, there have been a couple, anybody can deliver a line once in a while that doesn't get a great laugh on the show. That's just the nature of the business when you're doing live TV. But just an all around great host. And I love this picture of him. I mean, this looks like 1986 or something, like this. I just love the tone of that picture,
Yeah, he's a timeless man. I mean, he still looks as good as he did back in Clueless. He doesn't age. It's crazy. Sexiest man alive. Just a great guy, Paul Rudd. So I can't wait to see what we're going to get from him in season 50 at some point. He has to be there somewhere. All right. So those were our 3 reveals for the show tonight. Dave Chappelle, Lindsay Lohan, and Paul Rudd. Some really fun hosts that we got to talk about tonight. Up next, to wrap up our show, I'm going to bring up the list of hosts that you voted for, my list, and Bill's list, who isn't here tonight. And then Haynes and Brennan, you'll tell me which list is better, because we've been, tracking this every week to give out some points. So I'll tell you where I had them on my list, and we'll also read out Bill's as well. So here we go. On the left, we have the host rankings. In the middle, in blue, we have my rankings. So from the bottom, 29 through 1, I got Paul Simon, Charles Barkley. I moved down Pedro Pascal after our talk last week. I just realized, guys, like, I think he's a fantastic host, but just one time in recency bias. Like, I don't know that he would crack my top 50 when all said and done. John Lithgow, 26, Amy Poehler at 25, then Maya, Anne Hathaway, Jack Black, Lily Tom Conan at 20, Louis C.K. 19, Peyton 18, Larry David 17, Jimmy Fallon 16, Galifianakis at 15, Dwayne The Rock Johnson at 14, 13 is Josh Brolin. Then I have Lindsay Lohan here at 12. Maybe after some talk, maybe a little high on Lindsay, but I do feel like just she was so important to the history of the show. Like I said, if this was the list of best hosts, she's definitely lower as far as factoring in, greatness, iconic moments. I think that I have to put her up a little bit. Chappelle, I have right in front of her at 11. I really wanted to do this exercise of like, how high can I place Chappelle on this list? And I do feel like the ones that I have ahead of Chappelle, I can justify a reason why. So that's what I did with the cast. That's what I'm doing with the host. So I have Lohan at 12 and Chappelle at 11, at least to start for this week, maybe to be adjusted. Barrymore starts off my top 10. Then I got Pryor, Eric Idle, Jim Carrey, JLD at 6, Elliot Gould at 5, Bill Murray at 4, Danny DeVito at 3, and for the first time in a while, I'm cracking somebody very up near the top of my list, and that is at Paul Rudd at number 2. Just so important to me. Deserves that justification at 2. Dana Carvey is my number 1. Bill Kenny, I know for his list, he also moved down Pedro Pascal down to 26 on his list. He has Chappelle and Lohan back to back, but he has Chappelle and Lohan a little bit lower. 15 for Chappelle, Lohan at 14, and he has Paul Rudd up at 7. So his top 10 is Lily Tomlin at 10, Pryor at 9, Galifianakis at 8, Paul Rudd at 7, Gould at 6, Jim Carrey at 5, JLD at 4, Dana at 3, Danny DeVito at 2, and Bill Murray is still his number 1 host revealed so far. Haynes, what do you think? Where do you feel these 3 should be on these lists, and do you like mine or Bill's better at this point?
Gosh, do I like yours or Bill's better? That's going to take me a second to decide, because I think you guys have really solid lists. And I will say it just, they make a little bit more sense to me. No offense to all of our awesome listeners, but like, I just see Danny DeVito at like 50 just seems so far down for him. Like, he's just such a talented guy, you know? So I like these lists a little bit better. Let me see, you or Bill. I mean, I'm such a huge Dana Carvey fan, but Bill Murray is like such a genius too. Like, this is a really tight list. And they're so similar. They're so similar too. You know, you've got Julia Louis-Dreyfus, you know, just 2 spots, you know, behind Bill, and there's just so much crossover. I mean, they're really similar lists. It's I'd call it a tie. I'd have.
What were you going to say before I interrupted you? You were going to lean where?
I was just going to say I would have to really get into the nitty gritty to pick one between you and Bill. I think so.
Sounds good. Brennan, do you have an opinion about which list is better so far, mine or Bill's?
Yours is a bit better.
All right, I'll take it.
Yep.
You hear that, Bill? All right, 1 point for me coming in this week, and Haynes will call a wash. But as far as Bill's predictions are concerned, so he predicted that we're going to get 18 5-timers somewhere on this list. Still down to near the top 20, only 6.5 so far. We counted Paul Simon as half just for Bill's sake. No new cast members revealed this week, so still only 6 out of 16 cast members, so still has a ways to go there. And 1-timers, only 4 out of 5 right now. I guess he's almost there, so he's almost near the 1-timers. If we get one more, he'll click that box here. Brennan, do you think he's going to get the 5-timers and the cast members predictions as far as 18 and 16 respectively?
Ooh, need 12 more in 20 for 5-timers.
Yeah.
Oh, I think half of them are going to be cast members. I don't think half of them are going to be 5-timers.
Okay, there you go. All right, so we'll see how Bill does when we go week by week. And I'm very excited for the show next week, as we're going to reveal 21, 20, and 19. We have a very fun show planned with the return of Bill Kenny from vacation and the return of Andrew Dick to the Saturday Night Network. He's going to come and join us next Monday night. It's been a few months since he's been on the show, so we're excited to have him. He's scheduled to join us next Monday night, so that will be a lot of fun. Of course, this isn't the only thing we're doing here at the Saturday Night Network this summer as we head towards the 50th season of Saturday Night Live. We also have our Everything You Need to Know About SNL series, and we just released our look back at season 6, which I'm very excited is finally out, that we get to share with you. One of the most controversial seasons in SNL history. So many changes, so many moments. How does SNL recover from that original era? Well, we talked all about that, so that video is available now. In conjunction with the release of the season 6 video, we just interviewed for SNL Stories Denny Dillon and Gail Mathias together. So we previously spoke to Denny Dillon on the show. We also spoke to Gail Mathias and her together. We had them both on, so that'll be a lot of fun. That'll come out in a couple days for you guys, so you can find that on our YouTube channel. Another episode of SNL Stories here for you. So while you go back to that season, you get to hear some fun stories from them. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. It was a great conversation. Then season 7 of Everything You Need to Know About Saturday Night Live will be released this Thursday night. And of course, we'll be back next Monday with a new countdown show. Haynes, thank you so much for joining us. So excited to get to hear how you're doing this summer, and really just a thrill to talk to you. So thanks for joining us tonight.
It was awesome to be back. I'm sorry that I was sick and missed my boys for the superfans reunited event, but reunion is the word I was looking for. My brain and stuff like that. But listen, having an awesome summer. I didn't mention this earlier. I saw Sarah Sherman a week ago, And let me tell you something, man. If you haven't seen her show, it is wild. She is a machine gun. She did not take a breath for the first 25 minutes. I mean, pop, 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 pop. Like her energy is insane. Her physical comedy is so energy intense. She is just killing it on tour right now. And I know that we all are familiar with her Sarah Squirm side. The show does escalate to a point where she's showing slides, and there are some moments where I had to avert my eyes. It got wild. I mean, it got wild. But she is just a force to be reckoned with. Like she had to find a little bit of her niche on SNL, I think. But man, she's a Tasmanian devil on stage. I mean, she is a whirlwind. It was amazing. So just wanted to mention that. And it was great to be on with you guys, and good to see you again, Brennan.
You too.
Yeah, it was awesome, Haynes, and really glad to hear that about Sarah. Brennan, thanks for joining us. Anything you would like to plug?
I was not plug, but I was gonna say Sarah didn't come my way, but Chloe came my way, so I got to see Chloe Trost. So she was really good. I got a nice picture with her and a nice signed little thing too, so that was fun. Just waiting for the SNL comeback so I can do stuff on Reddit.
Yeah, well, we're not that far, so I'm looking forward to that coming back very soon. So to catch all of our coverage of everything we got going on this summer and in the new season of the show, you got to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify to never miss an episode of everything we have here at the Saturday Night Network. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X at the SNL Network to see everything that we will be putting up. And of course, as we get closer to the 50th, we'll have a lot of great content for you. All right. I want to thank our presenting partner for the show tonight, and that would be latenighter.com, and our friends here in the chat for joining us on this Monday evening. On behalf of Haynes and Brennan, my name is John Schneider from the Saturday Night Network, and we will see you next week, everybody. Have a good one.